You're now listening to the Hot Take Podcast with Stephen Blake, your source for everything fantasy football. Here are your hosts, Stephen Taroni and Blake Sullivan.
Welcome in. This is the Hot Take Podcast, and we are back for another episode. I am excited today to talk about Week 11. Oh my goodness, we are here at Week 11. I can't believe it. It's been a while since we've actually recorded a podcast. We've been doing the live shows on Twitter. You've been following on Full-Time Fantasy. But this time we want to give you something that you can listen to throughout the week and going up to Week 11. So we have a special guest on the show today, Adam Stark of Everyday Fantasy Football. What is up, Adam?
What's going on, Steven? I'm just happy to be here, getting ready to talk some football right before this Thursday night matchup. So let's do this, man.
Yeah, we got some news to get into. We're going to talk about some of the more compelling matchups this week. And then, of course, we're going to talk about a couple skill positions that we're high on this week that maybe the consensus isn't as high on. But first, yeah, you and I met at the Midwest Fantasy Football Expo. That was a good time. It was a pleasure drafting with you in the charity draft. How is your league doing, or your team in your league doing for the FF Statistics charity draft?
I'm doing pretty good right now. I'm in fourth. I'm doing a lot better than I was. To start out, I think I started out 2-4. I was. Now I'm 6-4. Or maybe not 2-4, but something like that. I've won at least, 4 or 5 out of the last 6. But anyways, it was a real rough start because one of my big picks was Cam Newton, and I tried to go with the Cam Newton Christian McCaffrey stack. Thankfully, Christian McCaffrey is playing he's scoring enough points to make up for Cam Newton's absence. So it hasn't been that bad, and McCaffrey's really, really saved me. But I've had guys like I had AJ Green, who I've still got stashed, who at this point I think I'm just going to cut him if I see, at like a semi-juicy pickup or, someone who I semi-like. But AJ Green, he's really been killing me. But the one that's really been helping me out was I got Julian Edelman, and I think the late 6th round. And this was right when Josh Gordon was cleared to play for Week 1, and all the hype was going around him. And I think Josh Gordon was even taken in the 5th round or something. And so to get Edelman that late, that was huge. So I'm doing pretty good. I'm in 4th place. How about you? How are you doing, Steven?
I am 6-4 also. I started off 4-1 or 5-1 in that league, and I've dropped a few. I won the last one, but it's interesting. That league is kind of interesting. You got the inflated points for tight end. So Austin Hooper was a huge pick for me. But I started off with the Zeke and Deshaun Watson back-to-back picks, which has really just helped anything else. Any other boneheaded moves I've made, those two have just helped me get through, kind of like your Christian McCaffrey. And, that
exactly
just tells you the story of Christian McCaffrey's season, because he's good enough to make up for what we thought, or what I thought, was a top 5 quarterback in Cam Newton this year.
Yeah, same here, man.
Yeah, Cam Newton was my 5 overall going into this season. And it actually ruined one of my leagues, because I'm on the board and my whole plan was to get Lamar Jackson. I mean, I drafted Patrick Mahomes last year. I was like, let's keep this ball rolling. Let me get Lamar Jackson in the 11th round, and he'll be my boom pick this year, or it, might not work out as much. We'll see, but I think that he could do it. I think he has that Patrick Mahomes-esque aura around him. But on the clock, it was Cam Newton. He was still there in the 11th round, and I'm thinking, well, I can't pass up my quarterback 5 in the 11th round. I got to get Cam Newton. So the rest is history with that. I mean, that's just how fantasy football goes, man.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I took Cam Newton as, I want to say, the 4th quarterback off the board, because I had McCaffrey, and I was like, I'm going for the stack, man. I'm feeling it. And sure
yes, exactly. Well, let's get into some of this news. You mentioned AJ Green. John Ross is back from IR. Now, I was very excited about this initially, but it turns out I do not think he's eligible to play until December 8th. So at this point in the season, he isn't really worth the ad that I initially thought he was. If you're in a deep league, like a 16-team league, I think it is justifiable. But 10 and 12 team leagues, I don't think it makes sense at this point. You're making that playoff push. All of your players need to be, if it's not a handcuff running back that you think, okay, just in case, like Brian Hill, something like that worked out for you if you had him rostered. I don't think John Ross is worth it. But someone that's a little bit more interesting is Devin Funchess. Now, he could play as early as this week. I don't think it'll happen, but he's back from IR. He's practicing. What are your thoughts on Devin Funchess, especially when you consider that T.Y. Hilton isn't playing this week and they have a slew of injuries on offense?
Yeah, I think Funchess can be kind of a sneaky play the next few weeks. We don't really know what he is for this team because he got injured pretty fast. So we don't really know if he's got chemistry with Jacoby Brissett or not. So I think he can definitely develop that or get some type of bond, the next couple games. I don't expect him to, bust out 1 touchdown, 80-yard game his first week back, but I could see it within the first couple weeks just because Jacoby is looking for a red zone target. Yeah, he likes Pascal and Chester Rogers, but those are just, not big name targets, I guess. They're not, the big body receiver, and that's what they brought Funchess in for. So they have him on a 1-year deal, and I would be shocked to see if he didn't get a lot of routes ran or snaps, just because if they don't play him at all, then they won't really see what they got in him, and then he's gone, and it was basically, wasted pickup or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that Funchess is interesting. I don't think he'll play this week, but then in week 13, you have the Texans, and we're going to talk about the Texans later. Obviously, one of the teams that you can target through the air in fantasy football and in real life football, of course. But if T.Y. Hilton were to miss, and, this is going to be a Thursday night game in week 13, if T.Y. were to miss that game as well and Funchess plays, that is an awesome flex play, in my opinion. And it would be a dart throw because we haven't seen it, just like you mentioned, Adam. So that would be interesting. And then, of course, in week 15, they play the Buccaneers. So even if T.Y. is back for that matchup and Devin Funchess has put together a couple weeks, you're thinking week 15, yeah, he could get a touchdown against the Buccaneers. So I do think that it is worth a stash at this point in the season. You could do better as far as waiver pickups, but, like I said, in like a 12-team league that's pretty competitive, I think he's worth a speculative ad.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially, we're getting to the point where tons of injuries are going on. You're getting all sorts of little bye weeks. And I think you could just be like a nice stash unless, you got a real tight bench and like a real, small league.
Right. Exactly. More injury news. Matt Breida, it doesn't look like he's going to play this week. He is perpetually on the injury report, unfortunately. We're going to get into that matchup a little bit later and talk about what that means for the 49ers against the Cardinals this week. Also, Emmanuel Sanders did not practice. He's listed as day-to-day. And you just have to really monitor today is going to be huge if he practices or not. But it looks like Manny has more of a shot than Matt Breida at this point to play in week 11. Big news here for me is Darius Geis. Now, you want to talk about a stash in your league. If he's still on your waiver wire, pick him up. I'm trying to trade for him right now. And, I see the logic of, well, that's a waste of time. I mean, the Redskins, they're dead last in points per game as an offense. You got Dwayne Haskins running the show who just looks horrendous. But they have the Lions coming up after this week, who one of the worst rush defenses in the league. The Panthers, top 5 worst rush defense in the league. And the Packers, another matchup that you can exploit on the ground. I think Darius Geis is an awesome ad at this point in the season that not a lot of people are talking about. Adam, is this just kind of like fool's gold for me, or am I on to something here?
No, I think it's a solid ad. If not anything, if he pops off and has, one solid game against the Jets or the Lions, his trade value, if your trade deadline's still open, will just skyrocket because so many people will just bite the bullet. Oh, Geis is back. But I don't think that'll be the case so much. I think Geis has a chance to be very efficient, but I did see some reports that they were going to make it kind of a running back committee with him and Peterson. And Peterson's been playing very, very well. So it's hard to imagine to see them take the carries away from Peterson. But then again, Geis is possibly their franchise running back and, the face of the franchise or one of them moving forward. So they'll definitely want to see what they have in him because he hasn't obviously played the last, 2 years. And I really think that Geis has a good shot to break out against the Jets and then the Packers and Panthers.
Right.
Why I left out the Lions is because Adrian Peterson owns the Lions. I think AP is just going to have a phenomenal game. Geis, I absolutely think he could pound in for a touchdown or something, but don't get me wrong, Adrian Peterson is going to rush all over the Lions in a couple weeks.
I love that call. Yeah, Chris Thompson is still out, and as long as he's out, it is Peterson
exactly.
and Geis. If one of those players is going to be a pass catcher, I would say that Geis is the better pass catcher. But it's the unknown with Dwayne Haskins. I think that what we've seen so far is a lot of growing pains. He was in a tough matchup against Buffalo. He hasn't really had a chance to play defenses that can be susceptible to the pass. And I really do think that it's this kind of like this realm of the unknown that really intrigues me, because what if this offense can be just a little bit better with Haskins on the field? What if they can get into the red zone just a little bit more? Then Darius Geis is really valuable, even with Adrian Peterson on the field. Like you mentioned, he has been playing well enough to earn the reps on the field. So Darius Geis would really have to play outstanding to take reps from AP at this point. Of course, there's always injury. Look, that could pop up with a guy like Adrian Peterson who is older, even though he is
for sure.
even though he is potentially a robot and is immune to injury. I would still say that Geis is worth a stash at this point. If he's on your waiver wire, you got to pick him up, even if you're in a 10-team league at this point.
I agree too. And even if you don't really necessarily like him, you don't believe in him, just take him for the chance to, so an opponent can't have him. Because if you grab him, you have no interest in playing him, and then he does pop off for a week or two, he's on your bench and not starting for anyone else. So that worst case scenario, he's on your team.
Exactly. He is a handcuff with standalone value, and I love that because I don't really like stashing handcuffs. At this point in the season, it's okay. All bets are off. Like I said earlier, if you had Brian Hill stashed, you're very happy right now. And I was fortunate enough to have him in a spot where now I can just plug and play him without having to waste any fab. Same sort of thing with Darius Geis, except there's some standalone value. We know that he's going to get, about 50-50 timeshare. So you got to like that for just a speculative ad at this point. Let's get into some of these matchups here. Steelers and Browns, that's going to be tonight. I'm going to get this show up on Thursday in time for this to be relevant. And, we got the Steelers at 5-4. We got the Browns, who I guess they've played better. They're healthier on defense, which is huge. And I think that helps everyone, including Baker Mayfield. But this is going to be a tough game for the Browns. I am still waiting on OBJ to really have the game that we want from him. Is tonight the night, Adam, or are we still going to have to wait on OBJ?
I think we're still going to have to wait against Joe Hayden and Minkah Fitzpatrick. Just the way Minkah's been playing lately, that entire defense has just been playing lights out. And I think the Steelers are going to want to go into Cleveland and just bully the Browns and just show that the Steelers made the right choice going out, trading their first rounder for Minkah. And now that if they win the game, they'll be 6-4 and very, very well in playoff contention. So I think this is a big game for both teams, actually. The Browns, they have had, a little bit of momentum. I'm sure they're trying to rally around, trying to make the playoffs. I'm sure if they win out, which will be insanely hard to do, they would probably make it at 10-6. But they're at the point where they don't really have any more losses to give. And the Steelers just have all the momentum in the world in which they're trying to carry it forward and just keep it rolling. So I saw a thing that Devin Bush, I don't know if you've heard, he's been calling predictions the last couple of games.
Yes.
And I think the last 2 or 3 games, he called them dead on. It was like 4 sacks, 2 interceptions or something. And so now he's calling 6 sacks, a fumble recovery and an interception tonight. So we'll see.
Well, I'm inclined to believe him because it's a Thursday night game. It's a divisional game, and this has the makings of a defensive grind. You know, I would be very surprised if this is an offensive output tonight. The over/under is 41.5. Yeah, that's low, but I could still. I think
I would take the under.
I could buy the under. Yeah, I mean, Thursday night games and especially this divisional showdown. I would probably lean the under. I think that Minkah has a real case for Defensive Player of the Year, by the way.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And, just because of the impact he's had on this team, it seems as if as soon as they made that trade, everything changed for this defense because, they were really, really susceptible to the pass before Minkah Fitzpatrick got there. Of course, Joe Hayden had his injuries too, so it has a lot to do with it as well, like you mentioned.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say the Steelers have won 5 out of their last 6, and the one game they lost was a 3-point overtime loss to the Ravens, in which Mason Rudolph got knocked out of the game, and they had the duck collar. I can't think of the guy's name right now, but you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
And so, anyways, they go into overtime, and in what looked like the Steelers had an amazing shot to win this game because they forced a 3-and-out or a turnover, something for the Ravens. And all the Steelers had to do was kick a field goal. But as we know, Juju Smith-Schuster fumbled the ball, and then the Ravens ended up kicking that game-winning field goal. But the Steelers 100% could have won that game had Juju not fumbled or just, a couple other things gone their way. So the Steelers, they're looking really good. And if you look at their first 3 games, they played the Patriots, the Seahawks, and the 49ers. Those are debatably the 3 toughest teams in the NFL right now.
Right.
So it's not their schedule. If you look at it, I mean, yeah, they haven't really beat any, top-tier teams. I guess you could say the Rams and maybe the Colts, but, they had Brissett out. But, I think the Steelers are more on that, better team side than, the bad team side, I guess. And I think they're really starting to look good with a easy schedule ahead of them. They got the Browns, Bengals, and then the Browns again. So, yeah, this is another thing to know. They're facing the Browns 2 times in the next 3 weeks. So this game is even bigger for that purpose.
Devlin Hodges was the name you were thinking of.
Yeah, there he is. Devlin Hodges.
There he is. So if you had to flex one this week, would it be Deontay Johnson or would it be James Washington?
I think I'm going to have to go with Deontay. He's a Toledo man and, kind of Michigan. But so I think Deontay, he's gotten a little bit more chemistry with Mason Rudolph, despite Rudolph, having the OK State background with James Washington.
Right.
I think Deontay has, looked a little bit better and it's just, felt better for the play scheme and just Mason Rudolph himself. So I think they have a little bit more chemistry. It might be like, internal chemistry, not, something that they express on the field as where, James Washington and Mason Rudolph are talking and dapping each other up in the locker room. And then come game time, Rudolph's locked in. He's looking for the best, the sharpest guys. And I think that's Deontay Johnson right now. I think he's looking the best.
Yeah, the last 2 games we've really seen Washington improve, though. I would say 4 for 69, and then last week 7 targets, 6 receptions, 90 yards, and then the 1 touchdown. Deontay is certainly in snap count beating James Washington every week. But we finally saw James Washington on the field for 50% of snaps. I do see James Washington kind of being that big play guy. So I probably would go James Washington where, Deontay has definitely hurt you. But he's been super solid other than 2 weeks ago where he he had 1 catch, I think. I think I would go James Washington if it was up to me, just because I do see a pattern of him getting on the field a little bit more and being utilized a little bit more. Like you mentioned, him and Rudolph do have that chemistry from back in the day. I do agree it hasn't necessarily shown up on field as much, but I think that we saw what we needed to see in the past couple weeks for him to have this buildup of being utilized a little bit more and just connecting on that big play. Because, look, he has looked for James Washington. In these games that Mason Rudolph has played, he's looked for him. It just hasn't happened. They haven't connected on that 50-50 ball. They haven't connected on that deep bomb. Now, last week, we saw it finally take place, so hopefully we'll see it again tonight. I would go James Washington if I had to pick between the two, even though I'm not crazy about either for tonight's matchup. Can you play Kareem Hunt? Look, he had 7 catches last week, and there was an actual role for him on the field. What are you thinking about Kareem Hunt? He also had a couple goal line looks that could have been touchdowns last week.
Yeah, I actually like Kareem Hunt, especially in PPR. He got a couple passes last week, and I think he finished with, close to 10 points or something in PPR, which, isn't terrible for first game back. Haven't played all season long, new team, new system, knew everything. So I think Kareem Hunt actually, he could be a solid flex play moving forward. The Steelers' run defense is pretty good, though. I think they rank, their Pro Football Focus ranked their run defense grades out at 6. So the Steelers' run defense is pretty good, and I think it'll be the Nick Chubb show for the rest of the season. But I'm not going to be surprised at all when Kareem Hunt steals a couple touchdowns from Nick Chubb, because it's going to happen. It's just Kitchens is just looking so flustered right now. He's about to try anything if it'll work. So if Kareem Hunt, gets a great breakaway touchdown in which he just shows off his talent, I think, that Kitchens might give him some more looks despite Chubb being excellent this season, just because they still have Hunt for next year if they want, because he's a restricted free agent, and then they could trade him if they want. So I think they're going to want to showcase him a little bit more, especially because they're kind of out of the playoffs, I guess, and, they don't really have much to play for. So they're kind of playing for other reasons, I guess.
Yeah, I'm with you on Kareem Hunt because they were putting him out wide. They were putting him in the slot. They were putting him in different positions to utilize his talent, and they were getting him and Chubb on the field together. There was a couple plays where they were both in the backfield together. So they really want to be creative. And, as much as we can get on Freddie Kitchens, and look, he has been atrocious as far as play calling and not utilizing his offensive players. But you have to love getting both of these guys involved. And, it didn't really take away much from Chubb. Chubb is still getting 20 carries. He's gotten 20 carries in the last 3 games. You really have to like that if you're a Chubb owner. And they tried so hard to get Chubb into the end zone last week against Buffalo. It just didn't happen. He had so many chances on that goal line. If you were a Chubb owner, you were really disappointed that he didn't get in. But you have to think that the regression is going to come to the mean there. One thing I do like, and you're dead on about the Steelers defense being they're actually 5th. We give up the 5th least fantasy points to running backs, but they are allowing 8 targets to the running backs and 5 receptions per game to the running back. So definitely some room for Kareem Hunt to be valuable in this game in PPR. Very sneaky play. I still think that you can consider him, especially if you're in a league where you have multiple flex positions.
Yeah, and I've heard the fantasy footballers, I think Jason Moore came out and said that Kareem Hunt is basically just in the Duke Johnson role, but he's not Duke Johnson, he's Kareem Hunt. So You're getting that role with a much, much, much better player. So now it's a little bit, the door's open a little more for Kareem Hunt or a guy in that role to be able to produce more in fantasy. So yeah, Kareem Hunt moving forward, I like him.
Let's move on to the 49ers and Cardinals. 49ers 8-1, took that devastating loss to the Seahawks and probably what was the game of the year on Monday night. And then they're playing the Cardinals 3-6-1. You got to love what you've seen out of Kyler Murray thus far. And he put up a fight against this 49ers team a couple weeks ago in Arizona. I don't know what to expect in San Francisco. I don't think he's going to have as much success, especially because the 49ers have to be playing angry after that loss. What are your thoughts overall on this game? And do you think that Jimmy G can have a bounce-back game? Of course, he threw for over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns against his team a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I definitely think he can. It's the Cardinals. Everyone's looked bad against the Cardinals. But going back to what you said about Kyler Murray and how he played against the 49ers a couple weeks ago, he looks phenomenal. That last, I want to say the last few minutes of that game, or probably 5, 6, 7 minutes, Murray made a beautiful throw to Andy Isabella. It was like that 88-yard catch and run. And Murray just dropped it right over the defender. And that was his first moment where you're like, wow, he can pass, man. This guy's got an arm. And then the next week, he made a couple more passes that just looked phenomenal. So now we're really starting to see that Murray is kind of a really good passer and not just like a scrambler and, okay passer. And he's really starting to develop his play style, I guess you could say. But going back to the 49ers, I think Jimmy Garoppolo can bounce back. I think they will bounce back. This was a tough loss for the 49ers at home last week to an in-divisional rival, Seattle. Now Seattle's just one game back of that first place spot and that first round bye. So I think the 49ers are really going to want to try to put the clamps down and just win as much games as they can and just go all out. So the line is 10.5, and I think it actually was 10.5 last time they played, but the Cardinals were home. Now right. The 49ers are home, so I think that's going to play a big role as well. Matt Breida, if he's out, I think Mostert can hop into that role, even though it's kind of a different role. I think Mostert will produce just as much as Breida would have. But I really like Tevin Coleman in this game. I think Tevin can have a solid game. He's going to kind of have that backfield to himself again. Right. This was literally the same scenario a couple weeks ago. I think Breida was banged up or something, but Tevin Coleman was the hot play, and he went out against the Cardinals and crapped the bed. So I'm going to double down with my Tevin Coleman, and I think he's going to be an excellent play this week.
So we talked about Emmanuel Sanders being out earlier, and that would open up the door for Deebo Samuel. And the thing is with this 49ers team is they spread the ball around. So you cannot be sure about which one receiver will have an impact because they like to use Kendrick Bourne. Richie James gets out there sometimes. Dante Pettis gets his chances. But you have to think that Deebo Samuel is going to be the beneficiary here. 8 for 115 last week, and it was his first 100-yard game. George Kittle is also out, and I'm really liking Deebo Samuel for this matchup. Like you mentioned, the Cardinals have just been bad against the pass. So if Emmanuel Sanders doesn't play, which we still have to monitor that, I think Deebo Samuel is an awesome flex play for you this week.
Support for this podcast is brought to you by Lufthansa.
Ethiopia. I had no idea what an incredible place I would find. The nature, unbelievable landscapes, ancient culture, and the people. Spending one day there completely changed my perspective.
Life-changing places brought to you by Lufthansa. Discover amazing stories and find your life-changing destination at lifechangingplaces.com.
Say yes to the world. Lufthansa.
Yeah, I like that too. I think Deebo has really developed some chemistry with Jimmy Garoppolo the last couple weeks, and I think Garoppolo is starting to realize, hey, this is a pretty good rookie, and he can actually catch the ball. As where Kendrick, I think I would play Deebo. And just because Mostert is, we saw just because what happened against the Cardinals last time. Tevin Coleman, he didn't have such a good game. I don't think anyone really had a good running game. Going right back to that now, but I know I doubled down on Tevin, but I think that's just because the Cardinals are, historically, or not historically, but this season they've just been terrible at the run. Yeah, so Breida last game, 15 carries, 78 yards. Not terrible, but he did have a 31-yard run that really, skewed it. And then Tevin Coleman, 12 for 23. So
Ouch.
It was really weird, but I think, I don't think that's going to happen 2 times in a row, especially with the 49ers being home, coming off a loss. I think Mostert is going to get some goal line work. I wouldn't even be surprised if Jeff Wilson, punched in 2 touchdowns off of 4 carries.
My name is Jeff.
So, literally, man, that's what I was just thinking. So,
I'm with you.
I'm
with
Deebo.
You on Deebo. Yeah. I'm with you on Deebo for sure because George Kittle is out. So now you have to love the slot receiver anytime that the main tight end is out because you have to think that, Jimmy G is going to be looking over the middle. Who's he going to find? It's going to be Deebo if Emmanuel Sanders is out in this game. Even if Emmanuel Sanders plays, I still think that Deebo has some fantasy value in this matchup. I haven't even mentioned Marquise Goodwin. He really has kind of fallen off where we thought that maybe he would be the wide receiver 1 earlier when, we saw Jimmy G last season really utilizing Marquise. Or that was 2 seasons ago, I guess, at the end of the year. Wow. But what about the Cardinal side, man? Can you play David Johnson? If you have David Johnson, should you be considering benching him?
I was getting ready to make a joke about that when we were going to do our running back and wide receiver starts of the week. I was going to make my start of the week James Johnson. But as we know, I'm sure a lot of you guys saw that run he had against the Bucs, in which he just took the handoff, jogged about 5 steps, and then got pasted. And it was just like, who is this guy? This isn't what? It was just so bizarre to see, a first-round talent, fantasy-wise, play like that. It was weird.
Eddie Lacy,
and it's not
is
like,
that you?
Literally, and it's not like he's been, real bad all season. Like he's been pretty consistent most of the season up until he's got banged up the last couple weeks. But I don't like David Johnson this week. I just think you have to sit him on your bench, and if he has a great game, then that is wonderful because he will be having a great game going into the bye, getting an extra week of rest, and then I think after this week he'll be not a solid play, but an option at least, because Cardinals will play the Rams the following week after their bye. Rams defense hasn't been crazy good this year, so if DJ has a solid game or at least just gets a lot of work and has an okay game against the 49ers, I think he could be good to go in a couple weeks against the Rams after he gets some rest. So I still think he's bugged by an ankle injury a little bit.
So you're more comfortable benching him than starting David Johnson this week?
Yep, 100%. It would be hard to start him against the 49ers this week, especially with, Kenyon Drake's just been playing, pretty good. He came out his first game. We saw him ball out when they played the 49ers a couple weeks ago. Kenyon Drake's opening up party or whatever, he went just crazy. So I think Kenyon Drake is going to have some momentum coming into that. And I think the Cardinals are going to want to give the ball to Drake a little bit more and kind of see what they have, and maybe, give David Johnson a little bit more time to rest, because I don't think he was benched because of play. I think it was a little, maybe it was a little bit of his play, but mostly I think it was just because he was injured. And I don't think the coach wanted to come out and, say David Johnson was injured. But I don't think, Kingsbury wanted to say David Johnson was injured, despite, he kind of did that earlier in the year. He put him in for 1 carry, and then that was that.
Yeah.
So, but another thing. I was just going to say, another thing to note is Chase Edmonds might be back as well for that Rams game. So this backfield could be a committee, as weird as that would sound. But we have, 3 solid running backs who have all produced at least once or twice throughout the season. So if they're all healthy in the next couple weeks, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I do think that David Johnson is banged up, and it's frustrating because we just, he's still listed as active. He's still out there getting some reps, and he probably shouldn't be, but he's out there, and as long as he's active and he's on your roster, he was your first round pick. It's so tempting to throw him out there. That would be really, really tempting to bench him. But, man, it's tough to do that. It's a tough call if you're a David Johnson owner. I do think Kenyon Drake has value because of the PPR upside. So I think that you can flex Drake this week. I probably, if it was my team, depending on my roster, I probably would still put David Johnson out there, even though it could be a death wish at this point.
Yeah. Also, depending on roster too. If you got a guy like Eckler or someone, like a sneaky play, solid flex where you could have David Johnson would have been a flex play or even an RB2 in which you could kind of put a flex or of Austin Eckler into your RB2 and then play a wide receiver into your flex and it's PPR. Then there's ways to get around it. But I think if you have to play David Johnson, I get what you're saying, Steven. There's some times where it's just you got to start your studs.
Yeah, I mean, it really just depends on your roster at this point in the season. And you really have to monitor his health, monitor the practice reps, see what's going on because, obviously, man, he just looked so bad last week. Christian Kirk, you're playing him. Larry Fitzgerald, I think I would bench him this week. He could always have a touchdown, but besides last week, he was really hurting your team being on your roster. So I would bench Larry Fitzgerald. I think you have to keep playing Christian Kirk and ride that wave, even though it's not the best matchup. Moving forward to the Bucks and Saints, obviously Michael Thomas is such a smash play this week. You have to be thanking yourself for drafting him, especially at this point in the season when they got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Michael Thomas is on pace for an historical season in terms of receptions, which would blow Marvin Harrison's record out of the water. I think he's on pace for 155 receptions, something like that at this point in the season. So unbelievable.
I think he's at, I want to say 80 or 86 right now. I can't remember the number, but I saw a stat. It was most catches without a drop, and it was Michael Thomas was at either 80 or 86. I can't remember if it was a 0 or a 6, but anyways, Michael Thomas was way up there, and then the number 2 guy was Chris Godwin with 60. So it just goes to show the gap between 1 and 2. Michael Thomas has 20 or more catches than the next guy who hasn't had a drop.
So let's talk about the other receivers for the Saints, because they haven't been necessarily relevant, but against the Bucs, I think that all plays are viable. Now, 10, 12-team leagues, you're not playing Ted Ginn or Traquan Smith. This is more of a DFS play because Traquan Smith was back last week. He played 83% of snaps, so he outsnapped Ted Ginn. He was only targeted twice in a weird game against the Falcons where they finally decided to play defense this year. I think Traquan Smith is a very sneaky DFS play this week.
Especially against Tampa, too. They just released Vernon Hargreaves, so there might be, some drama, or not drama, but, just some commotion going on with that secondary and that defense. They've just been looking terrible all year. The Bucs have been the team, you want to pick on. They've lost 4 of their last 5. They beat the Cardinals last week, but it's Cardinals, so I think, I like Ted Ginn a little bit more this week. I think Ted Ginn is, I just have a weird feeling he's going to get just a deep touchdown. I don't know why. My gut's just telling me that, though. So I'm going to lock that in as a Ted Ginn touchdown this week.
Okay. I like that. I really do. Alvin Kamara, the Bucs have actually been pretty good against the run this year, but Alvin Kamara is matchup proof, especially with PPR upside. You have to love Alvin Kamara this week. You're starting him, of course, never bench Alvin Kamara. Latavius Murray, move on from that. If he gets a touchdown and he just pummels into the end zone, so be it. But I'm not starting Latavius Murray. I would say that go back to DFS, Kamara might be lower owned than usual, just because he, 2 weeks ago, I think he didn't play, right? I mean, and then last week it wasn't a great game. This week, I would certainly play Alvin Kamara in DFS in a situation where he might be lower owned. It's a favorable matchup for the Saints, so I would definitely play Kamara in DFS.
Yeah, I think he could be a solid play too, because a lot of people are going to be afraid of this Bucs run defense, and they've been very, very good throughout the season. They last time they played the Saints, they only held Kamara to 16 and 62 with he also had 6 catches for 42 yards. So his rushing wasn't there, but if his pass game, his receptions are still there, and all he really needed was just 1 touchdown, and then he has a phenomenal game. So I think that this game flies under the radar, where he had 22 touches and 104 yards, but no touchdown. And as Alvin Kamara, you're thinking now I want 17, 20 points. So a 10-point, 12-point game or whatever isn't that good for Kamara, but I like him. If he could have just got 1 touchdown, where all the touchdowns were just passing touchdowns, but we know Kamara is great in the receiving backfield, so he could easily get a reception for a touchdown, which the Bucs have been not susceptible to passing reception touchdowns from running backs, but they do let up some passes to the running backs. So I think Kamara is an excellent play. I do like that call, Steve.
Yeah, so they are allowing almost 7 targets to the running back and over 4 catches to the running back per game are the Buccaneers. But, of course, like we said, Kamara is just different, and Kamara is going to be used. They funnel the targets to Thomas and to Kamara in the passing game. That's why none of these other receivers are necessarily relevant on a week-to-week basis. But I do think that this week one of those guys is going to be relevant, either Ginn or Smith, as far as a dart throw. So, if you're in a deeper league, you could play those guys. Let's look at the Bucs side of the ball. Marshawn Lattimore doesn't look like he's going to play. And you're starting Mike Evans, you're starting Chris Godwin, no matter what. But I think this is a reason that you can think about starting Jamies Winston comfortably with Marshawn Lattimore missing action. Last in New Orleans, he only had 200 yards, which was the only game he's had less than 300 yards since week 3. So any other game he's put up over 300 yards. But in that game, he had 2 touchdowns. I think Jameis Winston could be in for a big game, especially as we've noted, you can't really run the ball, well, you can run the ball on the Saints. I'm thinking on the other side, but Ronald Jones and Peyton Barber both haven't been great on the ground. We actually saw Ronald Jones being utilized in the passing game, which was so surprising to see. But what do you think about Jameis Winston this week?
Yeah, I like Winston. I think he could be a solid play. And against New Orleans, you might be thinking, oh, New Orleans is great defense. But they've let up some high-scoring games to, some quarterbacks that can throw the ball. Last time they played the Bucs, we saw Jameis and Godwin connect for 2 touchdowns. So I think Mike Evans could have a bigger game, especially if Lattimore is out. I think it'll just be a field day if Lattimore's out for both Evans and Godwin. But I think Jameis, he could be a great start. He's looked pretty good the last probably like 3-4 weeks on fantasy terms. Yeah, he's been throwing your 2 interceptions, getting your turnovers. But if he could just limit that, then he goes from like a 17 to like 20 point ceiling to a 22 to 25 point ceiling. So Jameis Winston, I think he can get it done. The Saints, they are home, so I think the Bucs will have a little bit of an advantage there. But the Saints are favored by 5.5, so it should be a high-scoring game. The over/under is set at 49.5, so I think Jameis is going to get it in the end zone. But I will say this Bucs backfield has been really annoying. We've seen, Peyton Barber. Last week we saw Peyton Barber and Ronald Jones get 2 touchdowns, and if those are passing touchdowns, then Jameis has a phenomenal week. But he only finished with 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions, had the passing yards again, 358 pass yards, but those 2 rushing touchdowns went to Peyton Barber and or not rushing. I think Ronald Jones had a receiving touchdown maybe.
Right.
But anyways.
No, I think it was a rushing touchdown.
It's just been a mess.
It was a rushing touchdown.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I can remember. So, yeah, anyways, but that backfield it's been real suspect. And, I have been one to advocate to stay away from them just because it's someone different each week. You get Arians saying, oh, Ronald Jones has looked a lot better, and then Peyton Barber gets the more touches in the next week, and it goes back and forth all the time. So would I be surprised if Peyton Barber and Ronald Jones scored? No, but I don't think that'll be the case this week. I think it'll be a little bit more Jameis.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and we were talking about the Bucs being a great run defense. Well, the Saints are actually right behind them. So I was right in saying that, Ronald Jones and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to have some trouble because the Saints are only allowing 67 rushing yards per game this season, only 11 fantasy points per game to the running backs. So, yeah, this might be more of a shootout than we think. This could be the makings of a classic Buccaneers Saints game where it is that shootout. To note, Jameis Winston has thrown for at least 300 yards in 6 of his last 7 games. The one game was at New Orleans for the 204 yards. Of course, no Marshawn Lattimore this week, most likely. Would you play Jameis Winston or would you play Josh Allen at Miami this week?
Ooh, that is tough.
Don't mean to put you on the spot. I know that's a tough one.
No, yeah, that's. I like that question though. I don't know. Josh Allen, when they played Miami last time, I think he kind of had. I think Josh Allen has a much safer floor, but I think Jameis Winston has a little bit higher of a ceiling. As weird as that sounds. But we've seen Miami. They've won, I think, the last 2 now, but they're looking a little bit better, and they're not looking like, the world's worst team in which Alabama could come in and beat them,
right.
Or people, start saying all that as they're, looking that bad. So I do think that Allen's going to have a great game, but he's only thrown 10 touchdowns, and he's got 7 interceptions this season so far. So right. He hasn't really been getting it done as much as we would have hoped he would have this year on the ground and running. But his last couple of games last week, 22 for 41, 266 yards. No touchdowns. It's been real weird for Josh Allen. And then even against the Redskins, 14 for 20, 160 yards and a touchdown. So I think I'm going to have to go with Jameis on this one. Josh Allen, don't get me wrong, he's a solid player. I think he's a great play this week. And when they played the Dolphins last a couple weeks ago in Buffalo, Josh Allen went 16 for 26, 202 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So solid game. You're happy with that. But against the Dolphins, back then you were hoping Allen would go for 25, 30 points, get rushing touchdown, 50 rushing yards. But he just he did not do a whole lot. So I think his floor is a little bit higher and his ceiling is a little bit lower.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. Yeah, the one thing with Josh Allen is he's not turning the ball over as much as Jamies Winston. He's really done well with managing the game. In his last 4 games, he only has 1 turnover, and that was a fumble. So since the bye week, he's been pretty solid, and he's been, he's had good matchups. He's had very favorable matchups, and I think that we're both on the same page of, with the matchups he's had, he probably could have played a lot better in terms of fantasy points. The most yards he's had through the air this year is 266. That was last week in Cleveland, in more of a passing situation. I don't think they're going to be in a passing situation this week. I think they're going to be able to manage the game, run the ball, and Devin Singletary and Frank Gore are going to get a lot of work. So, yeah, I would go Jameis in what I think is going to be more of a pass-heavy type of situation. Let's go to the Ravens and Texans. This is going to be the last one we're going to talk about today. This is my favorite matchup of the week, Lamar Jackson against Deshaun Watson. What a game this is on paper. You have to love Lamar Jackson against the Texans this week. The Texans are terrible against the pass. They are 28th in the league in fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position, which makes Hollywood Brown just an awesome play this week. You have to start up Hollywood Brown, not that you weren't going to anyway based on what he did for you last week, but this is an awesome game for all Ravens. I would say Lamar Jackson, Hollywood, Mark Andrews, and Mark Ingram. You have to fire them up in this matchup.
100% agree. I think I love your note on here. It just says under the Ravens-Texans game, the note is Lamar Jackson, ... that is all. And that's literally what it's been. Lamar Jackson, that is all for the Ravens. It's like he's pretty much all they've really needed, and he's been just doing it all himself. I know he's had some help with Mark Ingram and, Hollywood Brown early on this season, and now he's back and healthy. So I think the Ravens are this is going to be a big game for them. The Texans it's an AFC, rival. So I think this is a potential playoff matchup we could see. And I think the Ravens and Texans both know that. I think they're going to be both, going head to head, wanting to, just kill each other. But I'm liking the Ravens in this one. I think, what you're saying, start them all. Mark Andrews, Mark Ingram, even now. I was thinking about Gus Edwards, but no, not yet. Mark Ingram still has that locked down. But I did have a little thought that later on the season, Mark Ingram's an older back, that maybe Gus Edwards could, help him out, keep the wheels. That we saw Shady McCoy was rested last week, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. But I guess he did have a week off. So it would be interesting to see if, they did a load management with Mark Ingram to try to keep him healthy and fresh for the playoffs.
Well, the interesting thing with Gus Edwards is that he's actually seen just as much snaps as Mark Ingram in the past few weeks. And I'm trying to pull it up now. But and then last week, actually on that first drive, he was in on the goal line and could have plopped in for a touchdown. I think both times Lamar Jackson faked it to him on some play action. But, the past few weeks, Gus Edwards, last week, Gus Edwards only had 23% of the snaps, but 2 weeks ago against the Patriots, 40% compared to Mark Ingram's 44. Week before that, 37 compared to 51 for Mark Ingram. And then a week before that, he actually outsnapped Mark Ingram. So you're not far off on this Gus Edwards thing, but I do think that Mark Ingram just has that role locked down. Gus Edwards is sneaking in there on goal line work because he is such a good goal line back that I do think that he could pop in for a touchdown. So it's not that far-fetched, but you just can't play him in season long right now. On the other side of the ball, on the Texans, you're playing DeAndre Hopkins. Will Fuller is back. Are you playing him, or is he staying on your bench?
I think Will Fuller, I think with just how susceptible he's been to injury, I think I would just want to make sure, he's fully healthy, because we could see him run out in like the first quarter, first 5 minutes, pull a hamstring or something, and he's out the full game. So, I want to see at least one game where he, goes out there, still has that same role with Watson. I know we really only saw one big breakout game for him, but we know it's there with Watson. So it's just going to be, is it going to be Stills? Is he going to be the deep guy, or is it going to go back to Fuller? So I wouldn't play Fuller this week, but he's definitely a guy to keep your eye on. And I think he's a guy who was probably dropped in a lot of redraft leagues. So if you want to make, or not drop, but maybe, teams have given up on him, so you can make a low ball offer for him if you're a Will Fuller, if you like him. But I'm not starting Fuller this week, but I think he could be a quality play next week.
That's a good call. I mean, it's not the best matchup for you. If it was like Miami, yeah, you're probably playing him. But, not this week, especially like you said, because he's been so banged up. He could go out there, run a post, and then he's sidelined for the rest of the day because he tweaked his hamstring. That is a realistic outcome for Will Fuller just about every week, unfortunately. But then again, so is like a 30-point week for Will Fuller. So he is so unpredictable, really tough to say. One person who, from the Texans, who I really like is actually Darren Fells. And past 2 games, he's had 3 touchdowns. He is the main target for Watson in the end zone besides DeAndre Hopkins. He's looking for Fells now, and a few weeks ago against Kansas City, 6 for 69 with no touchdowns. The past 2 weeks, 3 touchdowns. So he's really stepping away from Jordan Akins as far as the number 1 tight end, even though the Texans do like to use 2 tight ends often. I think that Darren Fells, with the landscape of tight ends the way it is, he could be a nice plug and play for you this week. If you were playing like Jonnu Smith, who's going to be on the bye, if you had Evan Engram, I think that Darren Fells, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, I agree on that. Fells has kind of also come out of nowhere. And I know we saw Akins was kind of getting that same role too. But the last probably 4 or 5 weeks, we've really seen Akins phased out, and it's Fells that's really taken over this tight end role and this red zone tight end role.
Right. Let's move on. Let's talk about one running back right now that is like a start of the week. He's a must-start guy, and the consensus might not be as high on him this week. I'll let you start us off, Adam.
Yeah, so I mentioned him earlier, and I'm pretty sure everyone's probably already going to have this guy in your lineup, but this is just some extra emphasis on it, and that's James Conner. And if I'm advocating for James Conner, that is great, because I've been a James Conner hater all season long, but he has started to come around. He has a really juicy schedule the next few games. They're playing the Browns tonight, and the Browns have, I want to say, the second worst run defense. The Browns are graded by Pro Football Focus. They have the second worst run defense, and that is worse than the Dolphins and the Bengals and my hometown Lions, who have just been atrocious. So only the Chiefs are worse than them, and that will allude to your running back pick a little bit later. But, yeah, James Conner, I think he's going to be a smash play against the Browns tonight. I don't think that injury is going to get in the way at all. I think he's just going to look 100% normal. But if you want a sneaky play, I think Jalen Samuels could maybe get in there and, maybe have some sort of weird role. I know we saw a lot of jet passes. I forget what game it was, but it was a few weeks ago when Devlin Hodges was still playing. They ran a lot of, they got all sorts of creative with Jalen Samuels. So I think he still maybe can get in there. If you need a flex play, I think Samuels, despite Conner being back and healthy, I think Samuels can be a solid flex play. But I love Conner this week, and I think he's going to be a great play for DFS. And coming back off an injury, I think he should be at a reasonable price. I haven't looked at anything, but yeah, I think he should be a reasonable price.
That's fantastic. Yeah, anytime that someone's coming off of an injury, he's probably going to be lower owned in DFS. And this is just a good opportunity for James Conner because of that, or to play James Conner anyway. If you're in season long, like you mentioned, you're not benching James Conner, but you have to feel good about him this week, and like I do believe that he's going to get the lion's share of the work. Also do like the Jalen Samuels call. Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers are very creative when it comes to their running backs. They always have been. So I do like that call. It's kind of like a Melvin Gordon, Austin Eckler situation, which my play of the week for running back is Austin Eckler, and he disappointed last week. So I think that you might be inclined to bench him because now Melvin Gordon has asserted his dominance. 60% of the snaps compared to 34 and 45 for Austin Eckler the past couple weeks. Now, in that 34% snap share against the Packers, he actually did pretty well for you. When he was on the field, he produced. He had 72 rushing yards and he had 4 receptions. So you were happy about that. He had 93 all-purpose yards. Last week, disappointed, but he did give you the touchdown, and you were happy about that because if he didn't give you the touchdown, he certainly busted. So I think the inclination could be to sit him, but against this Chiefs team, who you mentioned, Adam, dead last in fantasy points per game to the running back, this is where you can hurt the Chiefs on the ground. And not only that, but the Chiefs give up the most red zone attempts per game in the NFL. And that's partly because of Patrick Mahomes and being such a fast-paced player that the opposing offenses have to try to keep up, and they end up in the red zone themselves. I think Austin Eckler is going to have a lot of opportunity in this game. Besides Keenan Allen and Hunter Henry in recent weeks, Phillip Rivers hasn't had a lot of help. Mike Williams has been pretty inconsistent. I think Austin Eckler is going to be used in the passing game, and then any work that he gets on the ground is going to be efficient against this Chiefs defense. So love Austin Eckler in this matchup. I think you can have confidence flexing him in this game.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like we were saying, despite Melvin, really popping off and getting the load, I think Eckler still has that, that line of trust with Anthony Lynn. And I think he knows his role, and I think PPR half point, absolutely a phenomenal play.
Let's move on to the wide receiver, Adam. I like your wide receiver this week. This is a good call.
Yeah, so I went with Tyrell Williams. He's been pretty good this season. He's developed a little bit of a chemistry role with Derek Carr, as weird as that sounds. But Tyrell Williams, he's looking pretty good. Granted, we have seen the emergence of Darren Waller. He's looked phenomenal, but Waller's started to slow down a bit. So he has only seen 7 catches in his last 3 games, which is very un-Wallerish, how his first few weeks were going. But, why I like Tyrell Williams is because they're playing the Bengals. Tyrell Williams leads the Raiders in receiving touchdowns, and he probably would be leading them in all the other categories, but he missed a few games due to injury. But as we know, the Bengals have just been awful against wide receivers. Their coverage ranks 4th worst in the league. The only worst teams are the Falcons, Giants, and Cardinals. So they are pretty bad. Their tackling is not good either. They're bottom 10 in tackling. These are all Pro Football Focus grades. So if you can't tackle, that's not good either. So Tyrell Williams, I think he's an excellent guy you could play this week. You're going to probably play him in your flex just because you have solid wide receivers. But I think he's going to post wide receiver 2 numbers or better just because that touchdown upside is so high with him.
Yeah, I love that call. I mean, against Cincinnati, you just have to really attack them. And Tyrell Williams is the play in terms of Oakland receivers. I also think that Hunter Renfrow is in play. It's kind of a dart throw there, but in recent weeks, Derek Carr has relied on that intermediate pass, and Hunter Renfrow is always there, just kind of finding a spot in the zone. So I think that could be a good play. But Tyrell, yeah, he could really pop off this week. I mean, we saw Hollywood Brown have a great game against Cincinnati. I think that's a safe comp right there with a speedster like Tyrell Williams. So love that call. My call is DJ Moore, and I think that no one is in the camp of benching DJ Moore at this point. I'm not saying that this is like, a hot take of like, oh, you got to start DJ Moore. But I think that you have to understand what he's done in the past 4 weeks. And that is at least 9 targets in each of the last 4 weeks, 10, 9, 10, and 11. Last week, he had 9 receptions for 120 yards in Green Bay, in the snow, in a game in which Kyle Allen was trying to drive down the field and beat Aaron Rodgers, which Kyle Allen really showed me a lot. And I think because of Kyle Allen, because of the schedule coming up, and they play the Falcons twice here, and they have them this week, and they'll have them again in a couple weeks. And the Falcons are, of course, one of the worst teams in the league against wide receiver. I think DJ Moore, at this point in the season, if you don't have a trade deadline in your season-long leagues, try to get DJ Moore. I mean, he's only had 1 touchdown this season. So in terms of fantasy points, he could have, there's a lot left on the table for him. But in terms of volume, in terms of snap count, this dude was on the field for 100% of snaps last week. Didn't come off the field. I mean, you have to love what you're seeing for the volume for DJ Moore, and then the huge upside, because this guy is a game breaker. He has that kind of game-breaking speed. So DJ Moore is my start of the week at wide receiver. I think he has potential for a top 5 play, because the last 2 weeks, 7 for 101, 9 for 120. If he gives you a touchdown, I mean, he's certainly a top 8 play for the week. So I love DJ Moore this week against the Falcons.
Yeah, I kind of find it funny how we kind of have opposite guys. Your guy is receiving yards and receptions dependent, and my guy's been touchdown dependent the whole year. But if Moore can get a touchdown, or if Tyrell Williams can, see twice the amount of receptions than he's been seeing, which is absolutely possible against the Bengals, and I believe this game should be high scoring because the Raiders' defense is pretty bad too. So I think despite, Ryan Finley is the quarterback for the Bengals, I do think, Joe Mixon and that team has a little bit of a will to win, and they do want to get at least 1 win. So they're not, one of the 0-16 teams like the Lions and the 2016 Browns. So anyways, I think if DJ Moore could get a touchdown, we are really going to see that this guy is going to be, has very, very high wide receiver 2 potential with even, wide receiver 1 upside if he could just get that touchdown.
Yeah, I was in the camp of why draft DJ Moore when you could just have Curtis Samuel at a cheaper price early in this offseason. But I do see the volume has been there with Kyle Allen. I think maybe there was a different story with Cam Newton. With Allen at the helm, and by the way, pick up Kyle Allen right now. I mean, because he's got Atlanta. He's at New Orleans, which isn't the best matchup, but again, Marshawn Lattimore could be out. Then it's Washington at home, at Atlanta, and then against Seattle, who hasn't been very good against the pass. So Kyle Allen could be a great quarterback for you. If you've been streaming the whole time, you pick him up, and you can comfortably play him throughout the fantasy playoffs, in my opinion. I think that he could be a solid play for you for the next few weeks. But I think that DJ Moore at this point has earned the trust of Kyle Allen over Curtis Samuel, where Curtis Samuel is getting the low volume, more like the Tyrell Williams, and then he is getting you the touchdown, so you're happy about that.
Yep, yeah, I agree. I think Moore is going to be the guy moving forward too, and I think he does have a little bit closer bond with Allen. I think he's developed more of that dominant wide receiver 1 type status.
Yeah, what a find in Dynasty if you're able to pick up Kyle Allen, because it looks like Cam Newton is out the door after this year, and Kyle Allen could be, leading this Carolina team for years to come with DJ Moore and one of the best running backs in the league, and Christian McCaffrey. Unbelievable what has happened this year in terms of just like the fluctuation at the quarterback position.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. This has been the Hot Take Podcast. Thank you for listening. Adam Stark of Everyday Fantasy Football. Please tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter and what you have coming up for them as we wrap up the NFL season.
Yeah, so basically I'm just on Twitter right now, Everyday FFB. I just wrapped up a signed DeAndre Hopkins jersey giveaway, but I'll be doing another signed jersey giveaway in the next couple weeks. So you'll definitely want to follow me and stay tuned for that. Once the off season hits, I will be getting a YouTube page and hopefully running my own Everyday FFB podcast, the Everyday Fantasy Football Podcast with Adam Stark, me. So that's the dream there, is to get a YouTube channel and a podcast. So once all that is up and running, those are the final goals for me. So once I have that up and running, made my handles and names or whatever, then I'll post all that information on Twitter. It'll be in my Twitter bio. And so you guys will just definitely check me out on Twitter right now. That's about all I've got going, but big plans for the future.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, great follow on Twitter. And, I just participated in the poll, best cheeseburger out there. And I had to go with In-N-Out just because of the value. I mean, you're not going to get a better burger for the price at In-N-Out. So I had to go.
Yeah, 100% agree. The thing I don't understand about In-N-Out is their burgers are so good, but their French fries are just, I don't understand. They're so just not good.
Yeah, there's literally no potato in there. I don't know what they're doing over there. It's like you bought a bag of hot fries or something. Like I don't understand what's happening with. But that's why you have to do it animal style and just get the Thousand Island dressing, the onions, and the cheese on top. Oh man. Making me hungry over here, Adam.
You're telling me.
All right, we are the Hot Take Podcast. Blake Sullivan should be back next week. You can follow him at Blake Sullivan FF. Follow me at FF Professor ST3, and of course my rankings every week on fanball.com. Thanks for listening to the Hot Take Podcast.